This month's Where Did the Road Go is brought to you by 6 amazing individuals. Greg Ross, Bill Illuminati, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I have with me again, finally, Mr. Steve Mera. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Serene. Thanks for having me on the show. It's been some time since I've been back, but
yes,
I'm glad to be back on the show.
Well, you know, I quote your stuff sometimes, and finally someone's like, why haven't you ever had Steve back on the show? And I'm like, why haven't I ever had Steve back on the show?
Well, I've been busy. I've been doing lots of different things, radio, TV, and all sorts of stuff. It never seems to end. And of course, it does seemingly become seasonable because a lot of TV shows and people start sort of looking around the October time.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And then everybody's sort of asking to do different things. And, you know, sometimes I have spread myself a little bit thin sometimes, trying to do as much as I possibly can to help others. But you know what? There's only so much time in a day. And sometimes you just got to say, well, you know, I just don't have the time to do it all.
Yeah.
So you end up being a little bit more selective, I suppose.
But you got right back to me, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I often quote some of the stuff we talked about the last time you were on. The two things that always stood out to me were the fact that you got EVPs that were literally just people talking about the equipment.
Well, you know, it was really interesting because I put this to the test. I grabbed one of the best EVPs we've got. In fact, when we get a certain class of EP, you see, it gets confusing because you've got the old terminologies, instrumental transcommunication, ITC.
Right.
And that was through pieces of equipment. Now, EVP is through a piece of equipment. So really, it is a form of instrumental transcommunication. Yeah. However, it gained its own terminology as EVP quite a number of years ago. And when people started using recording equipment. Now we've got dictaphones and then digital audio, very small pieces of equipment now, which can do the same. However, when we actually ask questions and get response, because we consider EVP are usually just random comments.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've had, you know, just a one very clear class. I mean, we have them in 3 classes, A, B, and C. A, exceptionally clear, you can understand what they're saying. B, well, you think you know what they're saying, but you're not too sure. And C, you can't really, there's something there, but you can't work out what they're saying. Now, we usually trash the B's and the C's, to be honest with you. We've got so many of them. We just don't, you know, we don't bother with them. We're looking for the class A's. But we wanted to take one step further and go for actual voice communication or AVP in some cases, the phenomena. And that is when you're asking questions and gaining a response to the question you've asked. You know, you get an answer back, and that's communication. That isn't just a random, you're picking something up. I mean, we had the recorder going once, and we had a female voice said, I've seen a lovely dress. I mean, it means nothing to us,
right? You
know, but it's just these random remarks. And don't get me wrong, it's a Class A EVP. It's exceptionally clear, and you can tell it sounds like a female. But when you're actually asking questions and gaining answers, then that's a whole different area because you're dealing with communication then. So we had to come up with kind of a slightly different term in regarding that, just to clarify that it is communication. These aren't just random things that you're just picking up on recorders. And we've had some exceptional ones. And yes, I mean, we went to an expert. Well, they call themselves expert. The people that have spent 30 years in just that subject alone of instrumental transcommunication or EVP. And we said, look, we've got this very clear response and we'd like to have a listen to it. So we sent it to him and we waited, actually. Look, we thought we'd be back straight away, but it was a few days later he came back to me and he says he couldn't hear the EVP because and then he went on with all this spiel about when conducting EVPs, it's best to not have talking and stuff, because you need it to be quiet so that you can clarify the EVP. And we couldn't clarify the EVP because there was too much, there was a gentleman talking. Of course, that was quite fun to send the email back to say, the gentleman in question is the EVP. Yeah, I think that surprised him a little.
Yeah, that is a great story. The other thing from that stands out, and has stood out to me all these years, is when I think you turned on a infrared camera and you got an EVP saying, "Ooh, we don't like that."
Well, yeah, because, when we were at Bothell in Seattle conducting the investigation, like we normally do, we try and document as much as we possibly can on video.
Yeah.
Because video content is good, and we do know that, that sometimes, occasionally, we will pick up some strange voice on video camera. Now, we don't plan for that, but we were trying to film certain scenes of, when I was being questioned. The problem is that the video footage got invaded by the phenomena. It was just vocal after vocal. And, it was very strange. We'd have pieces of equipment set up, and, the video footage is just showing us setting up this piece of equipment, and, is the memory card in? We didn't know, we couldn't remember. So we had to check. And then a voice comes in and says, "It's a camera. It's a camera." and what's interesting is that it's not our voices. And it's sort of saying it's a camera. It was not a camera, actually. It was a Tascam audio piece of recording equipment. But it was like they were trying to identify it. But what's also interesting is when someone was saying it's a camera, who are they referring to? Who are they talking to?
Yeah.
And that it picked it up as clear as our voices. But interesting, when we come to do the analysis across all these so-called captured voices, it's not human vocal frequency. Now, this is what's puzzling, is because the equipment we use is designed to pick up vocal sounds, harmonic, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Cameras and audio equipment aren't really designed to be out of that spectrum, because we wouldn't normally hear them in ultrasonic or infrasonic.
Right.
So they don't make them that way, unless they're very specialized pieces of tools. But how did it get onto the equipment? Because we didn't hear anything at the time, so it wasn't harmonic. And what we realized is that these EVPs on various different forms of equipment, be it audio equipment or even video cameras, they're transplaced. We discovered a new phenomena. It's called transplacement. It's where the phenomena targets pieces of equipment and puts things on it, which it shouldn't do, because the equipment isn't capable of recording it normally, because the parameters of the recording sound isn't the frequency. It's only the frequency of harmonic, so we should hear it, but it isn't. And that's interesting, because when we analyze these things, you say, well, that's below, it's 16 hertz. How can a camera get on 16 hertz? It's not designed to. And yet it's on there. And when you analyze it, you can get the feedback from the analysis that it's 16 hertz. And you think, well, it's impossible. So they're actually doing is that they're actually, they don't have vocal cords. So they generate a sound that we would hear to be voices. And it's placed directly on the equipment, as opposed from the equipment being able to record it as a normal process. It's placed directly on it. And we've had tests like this before. We had Olympus, actually, very well-known company, make a lot of audio equipment, and their engineers out. They were our sponsors for this experiment, and we used 3 of their devices, all brand new, all the same model. And it was a DM670. Now, it was a very popular recording device. And we ran it for 10 seconds in an environment, and all 3 were all recording at the same time in completely silent. After the playback, we got a male voice on the first one, a female voice on the second, and just pops and clicks on the third one. We don't even know what the pops and clicks were, to be honest. And they were kind of scratching their heads. They're thinking, well, none of us heard anything. So how did the recording equipment capture it? And they couldn't work it out. These are the engineers. This is Olympus themselves. They said, there's another parameter that must be happening. That's bypassing the recording process, and it must be another way. Well, this is that targeting, transplacement directly to the devices. And 3 different things as well, on all 3 at the same time, just for 10 seconds. And we went on to do further tests like that and get very, very similar things all the time. And they couldn't conclude how that device could do that because the device can't, but the phenomena can transplace it onto the device as opposed from going through the normal parameters of the recording process. So we kind of realized, well, we've just stumbled across a phenomena here. And as time went on, we realized that it even expands to the point where we ourselves are pieces of equipment. There were times when we did hear things harmonic, a voice that came out from the corner of the room. We all heard what it said. And in fact, we actually said, don't tell us, write it down what you heard. And we all heard the same thing. Now, to all of us, it sounded like a female voice saying a certain sentence. Yet, the recording devices we were all running at the time didn't hear it, didn't capture it. And that's harmonic. Yet we heard it. Well, then we started to conduct tests, and we realized that under certain circumstances, we are transplaced too by the phenomena. It happens to travel to the inner part of the ear. It's not utilizing the eardrum and the vibration because it's not harmonic in the air. We think it is because we think, we've just heard the sound in a normal way. But what we don't realize, our brains don't recognize the difference between the inner ear, the cochlear area, being manipulated by the phenomena. That's like a tube of hairs and liquid and crystals at the end, which it interprets the signals and turns it into a language we understand. Mm-hmm. And the brain recognizes that. It is that process that they're doing. So they're translating to our inner cells as well, because the equipment didn't record it, and yet we all heard it, and multiple pieces of equipment. That's happened quite a number of times. So transplacement phenomena from the phenomena directly targets pieces of equipment, puts things on them, and also targets its individuals. Now we have a big problem now because people might say, as you're out and about, oh, I've just heard my mother's name being called over my shoulder. Did you hear it? And other people might say, no. Is that person misunderstood, or is that person not, made a mistake? Well, not necessarily. They may have been targeted by the phenomenon. It's very, very difficult to say now.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's step back real quick and tell people how you got involved in this stuff, and then I want to get more deeper into the EVP stuff.
Sure, absolutely. I do a lot of lectures, and I travel the world lecturing internationally. I talk about my research. I talk about my work. I don't talk about me much, though, but I've been an experiencer since I was 7 years of age. Mm. And you could just say, give me a helping hand. The phenomena came knocking on my door. I didn't plan this. But it got me intrigued after experiencing phenomena firsthand from early childhood. And there was no let up after being 7 years of age. There was no let up. And that was a multitude of various different types of phenomena. Now, I was suddenly thrown into a world of what is real and what isn't at a younger age. And that's kind of got me triggered into the subject. So, when I was like 13 and 14, my friends were reading comic books and I'm reading Eric von Daniken and Brad Steiger books. I was just fascinated. I wanted to know, why am I experiencing these things? And I've realized I'm not the only person as time went on. And then some people said, oh, well, you'll stop having experiences in your teens. It kind of disappears. And I was like, wow, I can't wait for my teens. And no, it didn't. It didn't stop. And it's still as prominent today as it since it has. And I've been at this for 41 years. So since I was 7 years of age, it's just not let up. So really, in some sense, it's kind of not only geared me in my research, but it also has given me the opportunities to investigate things a little bit more often than normal because, I'm some might say unfortunate, but for scientists, I say fortunate to be able to have replicable, information and being able to conduct tests when the obtaining of that information is at a higher advantage. So that's been helpful for me.
Well, you said you had a variety of experiences. Like what types of things did you experience?
Okay. Well, it's going to sound like I'm an absolute fruit nut. Okay, so my first experiences is that there was a figure in my bedroom. I woke up as a child. I don't wake up in the middle of the night. I never did, ever. I mean, I never once remembered waking up and it was pitch black. Because we didn't live with lights on in the house. It was back in the 60s. They were all turned off at night. I knew nothing about the paranormal. Wasn't ever talked about it, or anything other types of subjects. But for some reason, I woke up around, I don't know, probably around about 3:00 in the morning, pitch black room, and a small figure walked out from the darkest corner of the room and interacted. And the first thing I wanted to do is just scream and move and run for it. And I was locked. I couldn't move. I wasn't in control of my emotions, my actions. It went on for, I can only assume, probably for about 5 minutes or so. It was only a very short experience, but that was my, and kind of this thing just kind of disappeared back into the corner room and gone. And at that point, then I screamed and played hell when I'm running to my mother and father's room. And since that day, the light stayed on. That's how much it affected me. But it was only about a couple of weeks later that I started seeing small balls of light.
Oh.
And then, as time went on, being an only child, I was playing in the back garden, and we had a very large laurel bush in the back garden. It must have been maybe 7 or 8 foot tall in the corner. A laurel bush, very thick and dense. You can't see into it very clearly. There's a lot of leaves, very big leaves, rubbery. And I was playing out there, and what happened was a head of a horse. A horse's head came out of the laurel bush. It was a white horse head, and I remember stood there in shock, thinking, how does a horse fit in there? And it used to, well, it didn't actually move its mouth or anything. Yeah, it seemingly communicated with me, just wanted to ask me questions most of the time. I had that experience maybe 5 or 6 times.
Oh, wow.
With that horse. Then I saw some strange things in the sky. There was one over the house, which my mother and father did see and got reported officially. Which was just a disc, a silver disc, just over the house, and then I started to have other experiences of seeing things and paranormal orientated things, people that weren't really there, and then I got plagued by like a jester of some sort for about 2 years. His face used to come out the wall in my bedroom, scare me to death.
Wow.
And a small figure. Now, what was really interesting about the small little man, I used to call him the Diddy Man, because I remember watching Ken Dodd, who was an English comedian many years ago, and he had a little show called The Diddy Men. And that's what I used to call it, the Diddy Man. And I'd hear scratching, and I'd wake up, and my light would be on, my bedside lamp, and I could look down, and we had quite large skirting boards. And I saw the skirting board, an area crack and open, and it was like a little doorway. Oh. And there was a little man there, and he used to beckon me to come with him. And I thought, well, I can't fit in that hole.
Right.
And he used to scare me to death. I used to run out the room. Of course, when my mother and father came rushing in to investigate, they never saw the little man. But they have seen some things, but they didn't talk to me when I was a child. It was only later in life they said, we remember times when, they heard me screaming or they'd seen things occasionally, So it was a very strange experiences. And I just put it all as one as a child, just weird stuff. But as time got on, I realized, look, there's actually subjects for this. There's UFO and there's paranormal and there's strange beings and, there's these different areas. So for me, it's not been let up at all. I mean, I still have experiences now, and my partner experiences and people experience them with me.
Right.
I don't know. Some people I've had people come and say, oh, how lucky are you, these other researchers. And I've said, well, you can say that, but, as a child, it was terrible, because, it was an awful experience, when you're not in control of yourself because something else is seemingly taken over. So that's led me down this path. And I just threw my life into this in an obsessive way. And started writing, journalism. I started writing TV shows. One day ended up in front of the camera, and that took off in a whole different area. Over 200 different TV shows now and things. We wrote the most comprehensive UFO investigators training course, which employs the paranormal aspects of ufology in there, because that's where all the other courses are seemingly a little bit ignorant that the paranormal phenomenon is within that.
Yeah.
Doing events, lectures, workshops, and TV, radio, podcasts, and writing several books. So, I'm always everything associated to the subject, 360 degrees. And I have been for 41 years, and still learning, believe it or not.
Well, yeah, I would hope so, because we don't have the answers. So,
no.
I mean, anytime someone says they have the answers, that's when I get concerned.
Yeah, I'm sorry, a little bit dubious. Yeah, there are some people out there, and I know them, these top researchers, and there are some which are got some great nuggets of information, and it's a great piece of the puzzle, should we say, of the broader picture. We're far from completing that picture, unfortunately, because a lot of it is out of the realms of our understanding. Metaphysics, our physical aspects of reality, quantum mechanics, all those sorts of they are going to have a play in that picture. But we're still learning, and I'm sure there's people which are far ahead of us in their research. Well, in fact, I do know that they are, because they've been in touch with me, asking questions. But, for in the public domain, we don't have the resources that the military have, or the government has. So we do our very best to try and understand, what is going on in a world of deceit and fake news. It's a problem. It's a massive problem.
Yeah.
But out there, there's 30% of that information is probably likely very true, and 70% of it is usually not inaccurate or fake information that we've got to swim through to get to the good stuff. So you've got to have a keen eye of understanding about where evidence lies and, what should be credited as authentic or not.
Yeah, and the problem is, as our technology gets better, it gets harder to tell the fakes from the non-fakes.
Oh, crikey, yeah. I mean, there are children now use software. I mean, I was at school, didn't even have computers. A music lesson. That was it. That was our computer class, a music lesson. And I see these youngins now, and they've been brought up in a world of technology and the software and the things that they can do in them. And it's a technological battle. So around about 1998 we decided to start changing the protocols in regarding what was classed as good evidence, because we knew there was going to be problems coming.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that, though that I always encourage people, if you have a photograph and you've seen something, you've taken a photograph, or you want to tell me about an experience you've had, or you've captured an audio thing, send it to me. I'm interested. I will never not be interested in those sort of things. Is it going to advance our understanding and study of this phenomenon? No, not likely.
Yeah.
In fact, what it is doing, it just adds another stone to the mountain we've already got. For me, though, I've traversed so much past that now, myself and colleagues I work with, that we only kind of really focus in and trying to advance our understanding of this phenomena, as opposed to, but we do data collection, still, and I still get people from all over the world that want to talk to me about their experiences, and that's fantastic. That's great. It's great to hear from other people's experiences, but I'm really trying to push forward as much as we possibly can in the time that we have to see if we can chip away and find out some of the good stuff.
Yes, that's sort of my aim on all this stuff too. The difference is my experiences started when I hit puberty.
Right.
And they started with Kundalini awakening experiences, and I had no paradigm for them, so they were terrifying and painful.
Yes.
But I mean, again, like you, I've had a weird variety of things happen. Pulling into my driveway once with a friend of mine, and we hear a scream inside the car. That's very, very quiet, very monotone, but very audible. And it had no attack, no decay. It just screamed for 20 seconds and then stopped. And
it's so strange, isn't it? We've had conversations going on in the back of an empty car.
Wow.
Which we've heard, and that was driving back from a radio station on the way home. And we were hearing a conversation take place behind us, and there was only us two in the car, nobody in the back. So I completely understand where you're coming from there.
Well, we had that. As soon as we got out of the car and I started walking toward my house, I see these lights on the ground. They're almost like a kaleidoscope of lights, and there's nowhere they could be projected from, and they were just on the ground. There weren't beams or anything like that, and they were there for just a few seconds, and I'm just like, oh, lights. And my friend didn't see that because he was busy looking around for whatever screamed. But
yes,
that
happens.
It seems like it's two different types of phenomena, but they're obviously interconnected.
Absolutely. That's why I've always pressed with my work. I have a project that we've worked on now for 10 years with my colleague called Project Doorway, which looks at the advanced studies of the paranormal and ufological, or UAP, if you want to refer to it that now, and the consistencies of interaction between the two phenomena, if they are two phenomena.
Right.
The more we've pushed through over the last 10 years, it's showing that really it's all one phenomena. But the problem is that compartmentalization, putting these into different boxes, was a problem for us. And it caused us restrictions in trying to do the studies in UAP when the information you're seeking is not in that area. It's actually in the paranormal box, and the same for cryptids and numerous other things. I mean, it's interesting that you say about lights, but you couldn't see any other lights around.
Right.
Which were projecting. And now, I had an incident one night when I woke up, again, like I normally do. Always seems to be around about the same time as well. And
what time?
I saw about 3 o'clock.
I knew you were going to say that.
By 3 o'clock. Yeah. It's, I don't know why. I have no idea. But I always look over it and say, yeah, it's 3 o'clock. It's a trigger for me. I go, okay, I woke up at 3 o'clock. There's something. And I saw an orange light coming through the window. So I thought, oh, what's that? What's the orange light? Because I could see it bounce, the reflection on the wall. So I opened the curtains and I'm looking out and into the darkness and I can't see nothing. And yet, when I look down on myself, I'm flooded in orange light. Light was coming through the window, hitting me. I looked behind me, I could see my shadow on the wall. And yet, there's nothing I can see, nothing that could create it. So yeah, it's the physics and the understanding, unless it's, that we ourselves have just been so manipulated by our perceptions that we're just not seeing something that should be right in front of our eyes.
Right. Well, one of the theories I play around with deals with how we perceive things. Like, you get these like one-off monster accounts that are very, very strange. And I wonder if we're just encountering something, even like a wandering piece of consciousness out there that our brain doesn't know what to do with. So it sees it and it goes, "Oh my God, what's that? Should I tell him? Yeah, I'll tell him. It might be dangerous. What's dangerous? Well, monsters are dangerous. I'll show him a monster."
Well, yes, that can happen. I mean, though I have been out with other people, and I'll tell you a very interesting incident. Now I'm in the UK, and you don't get many reports of banshees in the UK. It tends to be an Irish phenomenon. Maybe occasionally reported in Scotland. That's usually through an Irish association with the family. But I was up on location and we were done. We were driving back down a very high hills, a very lonely road, and it was very bumpy, so we had to go relatively slow. And something was flying probably about 20 feet off the ground, flew in front of us. And the sun was just dipped, so it's still bright, it's not dark. And I saw what looked to be a woman with a tatty old grey dress with holes in, flying across very fast. I mean, faster than normal movement, but flying, arms down by the side, lots of hair blowing in the wind as she traversed past, and even the dress was fluttering behind. And a very strange movement. She kind of swooped down behind this limestone wall. And as we drove past, I looked and I saw her put two hands up on the wall, very, very white hands. And the face came up with all this big, wiry hair. The eyes were just kind of big black voids. The mouth was wide open, agape, which was black. And the face was just pure white. And I looked at this, and I kind of, at that moment, I just turned and faced forward. And for some reason, I said nothing until for about half a mile. And then I kind of seemingly come to. And I looked at the driver and I said, did you just see something? Of course, slammed the brake on. It came to an abrupt stop. Oh my God, tell me what you've just seen. Well, it turns out we've both seen exactly the same thing. Now, what is interesting is that the phenomena seemingly has the capabilities of grabbing us in a way that stops our actions because anybody that knows me, I would have been straight out the car because it doesn't scare me these things now. Not now, but I would have been straight out the car and pursuing them. That's what I'm like.
Right.
And it's like I was held off about half a mile, or both of us were, from even talking about what we'd seen. until we kind of would let go from the phenomenon, or phenomena let go of us in some way. Doing the research, we found that this is what is referred to as cognitive limitation, which the phenomena sometimes can do. This is why people sometimes have got a camera in their hand and you don't take a photo. Yep. Why didn't you take a photo? I didn't think to take a photo. You know, it's just that you're grabbed by the phenomena somehow. And that was just, and it was, by all accounts, I have to say, it was a banshee. And, the other person saw exactly the same thing I did. We couldn't work out why we're seeing a banshee. In England, it's a bit strange, but like you say, did it just present itself like that? Yeah. This is a very odd experience that we had, certainly in a location which is renowned for strange phenomena to take place. That's why we were up there that night. But yes, I think, in some cases, the phenomenon grabs us in a way that we just can't or don't seem to act normally at the time.
Well, the other thing I've noticed, for instance, Tim Renner had recorded they were down at a bridge in Gettysburg, and there was a very loud bang. And in person, that bang was incredibly loud. He said it was almost as loud as a gunshot. And They were recording the audio at the time. And on the audio, it just sounds like a very light little bang, like tap, bang.
Yes. And the manipulation of audio.
But I also wonder, is it that our sensors are picking up more than just the audio and amplifying the audio because it doesn't have a way to present it to us?
It could be, Soraya, it could be. I mean, we have it the other way around as well. So you get both scales, both ends of this spectrum. And let me give you a scenario. There was a small stick light, and this was in at where we were at Bothell House, in Washington, when we were over there doing the investigation in Seattle. There was a very small plastic light round, which was hooked on a screw upstairs on the landing, and it was only plastic. It's only a very cheap plastic light. You just press it, it comes on.
Yeah.
And we had recording devices all over. Well, the whole house was rigged up to a base station, which was monitoring everything. Every single pin drop, they would get them. And we were monitoring the house regularly, and we were all downstairs in the kitchen, when suddenly we heard a tremendous bang upstairs. And of course, we all heard this all the way downstairs into the kitchen at the back. And we thought, well, that's come from upstairs. So, of course, we went upstairs, and this light was on the floor. Not broken, I have to say. It was on the floor. So it didn't come down heavy and hard, because it surely would have broken. And when I'm doing the replication, of course, because we're trying to figure out, well, that's a bit small to make that loud noise.
Yeah.
We tried to replicate it. So first thing we noticed when we picked the light up and the screw was still in the wall, was that it has to have been lifted off the screw, because it's at a certain angle. So you have to lift it off a little bit for it to drop down on the floor. So there's no way it could have fallen off.
Right.
And never had done previously. But when we went downstairs and we just lifted it off and just let it naturally drop to the floor, and we went back and looked at the recordings. Well, the recording of when it fell on the floor was 37 decibels, and we might have not heard it, or we might just have heard it. The impact from the incident, though, the sound registered at 62 decibels. So it was rather amplified on purpose, the sound of the incident, for us to be able to hear it properly and recognize it as it should be, such as the phenomena being so resourceful, and for us to interact, and find out what happened. And realize it was a paranormal event.
Right.
So I think in some cases you can manipulate the sound, because there's no way that we could get 62 decibels from that action. And yet it occurred, because we've got the recording devices and the system. It monitored the spikes and of the sound. And we went back and looked and analyzed them. We realized that, it's almost double the amount of what we would expect. So yes, I do believe that they're most definitely manipulating sound.
So have you gotten EVPs? Have you tried devices that don't have actual microphones on them?
Right. Okay. So it's going to get very interesting this now. So we started off with old tape recorders back in the day. The only old 80s telly, big things where you could put a cassette in and press these big buttons down.
Yep.
That's what we started off with. And we used to get recordings on cassette, and we used to get EVPs, and we never thought anything of it. And then what happened through a number of experiments that have happened over the years, and not just with myself and other teams as well, is that on one particular occasion, During these several tests, they pressed record on the cassette recorder and went about the business. And they went back to the recorder after the session and realized the cassette wasn't going around. What had happened is that the power cord wasn't fully pushed in at the back. It was a figure 8 power cord. It wasn't pushed in. That's to make good contact. Therefore, it wasn't powered. So when you press record, the buttons went down, but the cassette wasn't going around.
Right.
But they didn't know because they just pressed it and walked away. Strangely enough, though, recordings were on that cassette tape of vocal responses, yet the cassette tape hadn't gone round and the unit wasn't powered up. So they thought, okay, this is interesting. So the experimenters decided to take out the recording head as well, and it is still captured on the cassette. So they realised that we don't need the tape recorder. We put the cassette on the side and requested for communications onto the cassette. This was a blank one, and afterwards they played it back and there were recordings on there. So this is the manipulation they can do. And it's a bit like there was a gentleman called Bacchi in Italy, I think it was, and he was communicating through radios, instrumental transcommunication with these intelligences. The science guys came in and brought in a very specialized made large Faraday cage to put the whole radio in. So no transmissions were ever going to get through that. Yeah. And yet it still bellowed through the speakers. So the scientists went one step more further and took out the 3 tubes in these old radios and took out the radio tubes inside, and it still worked. So we've got to get out of this box about the physics and the understanding about transplacement. They can do this. They're not relying on the equipment. They're just relying on you hearing one way or another of the transplacement. And sometimes it can bypass the equipment completely. So, yes, recording. I mean, we've even had we had a specialized recorder. This is a great one. We have specialized recorders sometimes, and these certain types of recorders won't let you phantomly remove. It's called phantom removal. It's a normal process where you can go in and say, well, I've got 10 recordings. I just want to delete track 3. These recorders won't let you do that. What you have to do is delete track 1, track 2, then track 3, and then 4 to 10 will remain. Mm-hmm. But we've had really great vocal responses. We thought, that is a belter. And, that people aren't going to believe this one. It's incredible. And then we go back and track 3 is missing. 1 and 2 are there, but track 3 is missing. The whole system won't even allow you to keep 1 and 2 without getting rid of track 3. And we've had CCTV camera systems set up, and we've had hammering at the door. The cameras are facing the door. When we go back to the system, it's been deleted, that little section of the incident from the recording unit. It's very frustrating, as you can imagine. But they do demonstrate sometimes the incredible acts that they can do with regarding equipment.
Oh. One of the theories I've considered is that sometimes this stuff could use us as a medium, so that what's creating the EVP is actually us in some psychic manner, and it's yes. talking through us to create it on that tape.
I think absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, we are a conduit. I mean, what people don't realize when people have experiences is that sometimes they're solely responsible as well. Yeah. From our side, I mean, it's a combination of both sides coming together, and we think that's just reaching out to interact with us, not knowing that we have contributed to this somehow. And there are lots of incidents like that. But what is fascinating is that there have been communications with these things, and they have been very deceptive. Right. Sometimes they'll give good information, other times it's just a pack of lies. And it's as if they do that purposeful. It's something that they do. So we can't take everything verbatim. Now, that's the problem for parapsychological units, because the parapsychology units will try and endeavor to figure out, is there an afterlife? It's one of the most burning questions that we have.
Right.
The proof of afterlife. And that's the only reason why it's been held back, and that they will not rule that there's enough evidence to support afterlife, is because of the deception. And, there's been times when, they've realized that it's not a truthful remark. And what happens is, on many occasions through experiments, is that somebody who may have lost their uncle recently who passed away, they go and see a sitter. Now, that person may be a clairvoyant, a psychic, a medium, you call them what you will. And I do believe that our people certainly have these abilities,
Yeah.
sure. But the phenomena can obtain the information from us and pass it to the medium. The medium talks to the person who's there, and that person thinks, wow, there's no way this medium could have known that. That's got to have come directly from the source. So therefore, it's evidence of my uncle in an afterlife.
Right.
Now, that's a problem because what we have in experiments is, and in fact, this is how we discovered this. When we got to a level, it took a long time getting the sitters, because these particular professional seancers, they have to be they have to be finely tuned, is probably the best way I can describe it. It's got to be the right people. And over a period of 6 or 7 months, we swap out these people with other people, and we look at the results, and we eventually figure out, okay, it's this person worked best, this person works best, and this creates the team. Once we've got a really good established team, we conduct the experiments, and we push forward and push forward and push forward. And eventually we end up communicating with things which are responsive. Takes a long time, but once you get there, it's quite exciting. And we got to the point of being able to communicate, in other words, ask questions and gain answers. So we asked, the experimenters asked these intelligences, can we, next time we come back, can we ask, say, 10 questions? And the response was, yes, we can. So, of course, okay. So we went away, and, it was interesting because I've always, with a snap of my fingers, when people say, well, what would you ask? I'd just say, oh, that's this, and that's this, and that's this. But what was interesting is at that time is that when we sat down and put these questions down, these 10 questions, it kind of dawned on me that I might actually get the answer, and do I want to know the answer? I never even considered that, to be honest, Soraya. I never did. And at this point in time, I'm thinking, because of the realism of getting answers, I could actually get an answer. And am I going to sit well with it? I'd be very choosy about what I'm going to ask. Anyway, between us, we all put 10 questions down, and we went back to the session, and we asked, can we ask these 10 questions? And they said, yeah, we can. And just prior, because we had the sheet in front of us, opened out from an envelope, and some of the people that were the experimenters hadn't even seen these questions. And before we could deliver any of these questions, 10 answers came out as direct voice phenomena out of the corner of the room. It's always above us as well for some reason, the voices. So if you sit down, it's above you. If you stood up, it's above you. Don't know why. And they delivered all 10, all of them, before we'd even asked the question. So how did they know it? Well, they must be obtaining it from us, the experimenters. It's the only feasible explanation. And if they are, then how can we honestly go to a sit-down session and ask questions and expect answers that we don't know?
Right.
It's usually that we do know, because we want the clarification that we are dealing with a spirit of the uncle that passed away maybe 6 weeks ago or something like that. It becomes very problematic. So when the parapsychological units heard about these results, they said, oh, well, that's going to be a real problem regarding us trying to press forward and clarify that there's evidence of an afterlife, because we could be being deceived. So you can imagine that's, wasn't great for some people, because they wanted to push forward the evidence of afterlife. And now it's just thrown another stick into the works, you could say, so it's very problematic.
And that's one of the things that you get a lot of ghost hunters who will say, oh, we're being scientific, but you're not being scientific if you have a set beliefs that you're trying to prove, per se. As opposed to just collecting evidence. And then they'll get EVPs and be like, well, it's proof of ghosts. And it's like, no, that you got something that's interesting, but that doesn't prove anything. Just like a picture will never prove anything. Like you said, it's data collection. It's interesting, but it doesn't prove what it is.
No, it doesn't. You're absolutely right. And that happens. That's the most common. It's data collecting, and it's, don't get me wrong, it can be exciting and rewarding for people.
Oh yeah,
it's not really rewarding for those that are having traumatic experiences out there in their homes, and you want some help somehow.
Right.
That's not gonna cut it, unfortunately, and that's what usually people get. Now, dealing with things like that, yes, it is problematic, and a lot of people do it, trying to obtain data, evidence, where we can start to learn. Because what we study now, where we are now through the research, is the study of paranormal mechanics. In other words, we break it all down, because the paranormal is just a word. It's massive. It consists of, there should be other words, to be honest.
Yeah.
It consists of so much things. It's confusing. People have even add their own terminology to things, and you think, what's this mean? And you find out, oh, it's the same as that, And it happens all the time. People think it's great. I'll just go, and it makes it look real scientific. But at the end of the day, it just muddies the water. What are people experiencing? Let's just break it down and say it for what it is. Now, the problem with that is that a lot of people grab data and it's not pushing forward. But to look at it, we have to break it down into parts. And when we do, a section was illuminated, referred to as paranormal mechanics. And how that basically is asking those questions. How does it do what it does? Is there a mechanism? Is there an intelligence? Is it responsive? Does it have limitations? What are its capabilities? All those things. Once we start getting into the mechanics of paranormal phenomena, it started to reveal certain things which were very, very interesting. And it's put us into a whole new area of research now in paranormal. It's scientific research, but it's things that we would never even considered if we hadn't even looked at the pieces. People are looking at too much sometimes, rather than, people say about poltergeist. Well, for me, if somebody said, oh, I've got a poltergeist going on, and I'm having these disturbances, I'd be looking straight in at the actions, okay, have you had any apportations? Is there a displacement movement effect? People want to say, what do you mean? Well, how far did the object move? Did it traverse a certain length of, did it move? How measure it? Because, when we do that, we realize that similar measurements keep coming up. There is a mechanism, and sometimes it was overlooked. How many people have had apportations and never analysed them? Right. I don't think apports should be even in the homes. They should be taken away from the environment because they've been utilised by the phenomena. And there's good reasons for that, which we've found through research and experiments. So we are learning areas in the paranormal mechanics which is starting to reveal itself as A, the phenomena can act like a virus. B, it's evolving and learning. And C, just what things that we consider a normality, they may never be a normality, because we've even questioned the fact is that our apports, the actual object that left, because according to analysis, they're not. Really? And that puts, we've done our fair share of analysis on these things, and they are not the item that left.
So what's the difference?
Well, I'll give you an example. There was an incident of poltergeist infestation in a place called Morecambe in the UK, and this is what I refer to as a high severity, high frequency case. This is when the phenomenon is at its peak value, and that means that you're having 6, 7, maybe 8 incidents per day. And with poltergeist phenomena, they're so resourceful that they don't waste actions. If an incident takes place, that action you will recognize as a paranormal act immediately, because it wants to generate vexation, because it's a parasitic phenomena. It's a fear feeder. And with the apport, in this case, was a mug, but it was owned by the owner. Just a normal mug, which disappeared from the side and making a drink, just completely disappeared from in front of her, and it was lost it was discovered 96 minutes later in the middle of the living room carpet, which was such a place where you couldn't have avoided it. You could have tripped over it. It was so obvious. It has to have been a paranormal act, and this is what they do. They're so resourceful, they're not going to put the mug in the sink as an apport, because you might just think, well, I might have just put that there, or, it's always done purposeful actions, so they're so resourceful. And of course, that mug was lucky for us. It was 4 mugs purchased at Christmas time, just 3 months prior. And the mug, by all accounts, it was about 12 degrees warmer than it should be when it was discovered. So there was some type of heat induction. We had to figure out the process of that. But we asked if we could take it away and analyse the apported mug. And also, did she have another mug which is identical from the same source, from the same manufacturer? Well, lucky for her, she bought 4 at Christmas time. So she gave us a test mug out of the cupboard, which was identical, came in the same set of 4, and the apported mug. And we had to put a little note on the apported mug, because the reason being, we would never tell the difference. Absolutely not. They weighed the same, looked the same, felt the same.
Right.
Everything that we measured, apart from the heat transfer, was pretty much the same. There was an EMF print hotspot, but it wasn't on the mug. It was on the location of where the mug was found. And it lasted just over 2 hours, and it started to disappear. And that was up to that was 9. I think we should hear about normally the normal EMF radiation levels in the house was about 1.8. The measurement where the mug was about 9.6, and lasted for about 2.5 hours and just disappeared. And it was only probably a couple of feet wide at the most, like a round area around where the mug was found. The mug went off for analysis with the bench test mug. Now, the test mug went into something referred to as Treewell University, and it was put into a specialized machine known as microscopy, atomic microscopy. And a sample of the test mug was put in for analysis, and the computer's very clever and brought all this data up on the screen and it was incredible because you could see like the manufacturing glaze, the heating process through the kilning process. You could see everything. The colouring, the glazing, everything. And it was remarkable how detailed it was. And then a part of the mug from the apported mug was put into the system to analyse, and it was supposed to cross-reference it with the other mug. So you've got the details of the mug, the test mug on the right, and the apported mug details turning up on the left. Now, the computer system couldn't even recognise that it was the test mug. It was so different for some reason. The computer system could not do a comparison with them both. It was treating them as two completely different things. And we thought, well, why is that? So another level of microscopy was taken place, and it came up on screen, and it would be reported basically that the biggest problem was the diathermic alteration in the mug. So, of course, the third level of tests showed visually the difference, and it was just crazy. It was nothing like it whatsoever. So we had to, because the computer system's saying this is not the mug that left, because if we should have got it back, we would be the ones on the right. So the big question is the transposition of the phenomena affecting the mug in some way? Well, we would people have always argued, well, it must molecularly break them down and rebuild them, and that causes the generation of heat, like rubbing your hands together, like friction, the molecules. Well, it wasn't just that. There were properties in there that shouldn't have been in there in the diathermic alteration. Enough to say there's foreign agents. And when you start to look at that, you think to yourself, okay, the computer system is saying it's not the mug that left. So where's the mug that left? So what's this then? Well, it's the apport might be something that's mimicked in some case. How would we even know? So, okay, so we have to do some tests. So what we started to do is we started to relocate the apports in high severity, high frequency cases. When there was an apport, we relocated them immediately out of the environment. And it was strange because we started getting phone calls from the people we were doing the investigation for, the disturbers, and saying, what have you done? Have you got rid of it? And I was saying, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Well, we've not had anything for 3 days now. It's gone, really. Now, interestingly enough, though, where we didn't take the apports into our own house, we took them to at the office and a certain location. Disturbances started to take place in the office. The phenomena tracked the apport, and seemingly, it seems the phenomena got, made a mistake. Was focusing where the apport was, and not where the location of the incidents was supposed to be taking place. So we started to think, well, is it got confused? Now, interestingly enough, it seemingly that over a period of 3 or 4 days, it seemingly recognizes there's a hiccup, and the phenomena starts to peak again in the home.
Right.
And the phenomena around the mug seems to cease, and it's just like many other apports. So we thought to ourselves, is the phenomena is so resourceful, the poltergeist phenomena, maybe it's so resourceful that it's actually delivering something to that environment, such as an apport, and it's there as a quantum anchor of sorts. In other words, it's there for a reason, and that reason is so that it knows where to deliver the phenomena to. I mean, this intelligence, poltergeist, are we sure that it's not actually doing it for 5 hours or 6 hours at the same time? It's delivering phenomena to different things. It might be multiple, could be hundreds of houses all around the world it's delivering to. And it has to have this mechanism of knowing where to deliver phenomena to. We start to get into the mechanics, the paranormal mechanics of how phenomena is being transferred. and utilized. Now, what was really interesting is that diathermic alteration was almost identical to the diathermic alteration in these plants in this report. It was known as a plant biological traumatology test, and it came from MUFON. And it was an investigation into a UFO that manifested, didn't fly in, it manifested close to the ground. People passing by saw it, people in cars saw it, vehicles, and it was bright in colour, and it was there for some time, and then it kind of just collapsed within itself, disappeared, and we have reports like that. But it affected the plants on the ground. It was very close to the ground. Science guys came out, took samples of the plants, did the analysis, did this report, plant biological traumatology test, and what was the conclusion? A profound diathermic alteration in the plants. And when we looked at that and we looked at our mug diet report, we thought, well, hang on a second, this is a bit strange. I wonder if the sudden appearance of a UFO manifestation and the sudden appearance of a mug or manifestation as an apple, I wonder if they're utilizing somehow the same physics here. You know, and that starts getting very intriguing now when you start getting into the advanced studies of UAP interactions and manifestations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really, little pieces of the puzzle sometimes you got to look at and just as a tick list. Okay, that's interesting. What that leads us to the next thing, as opposed to on the big picture of the paranormal, because it's just too big, the whole thing to sort of digest as a whole.
Absolutely. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, quick break to give you contact info and a recommendation. All contact info can be found at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And there is a link to our Patreon on there. If you want to become a patron, it's only $3 a month. You get extra stuff every month. You get the show a week early. Usually a Patreon segment for every single show. Every once in a while, there isn't one, but it's very rare. And extra stuff throughout the month usually as well. If you want to submit a story, it's stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. That's the email to use. And you can find everything on the website. All the various contact info, all our social media, and every show, all the way back to the very first one in 2013. And all of that is free. There's also some fiction I've written and some other stuff floating around on the site you can explore. If you're into heavy music, check out my music show, The Last Exit for the Lost. It's a heavy show. It's metal, punk, industrial. There's comedy music. It's a lot of very eclectic stuff, very underground stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else. And it's 6.5 hours every week and has been for 30 years now. We're in the middle of our 30th year celebration, playing stuff from bands and stuff that have been on the show over that time period. And man, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. Big bands and small bands and so many good bands. If you like I said, heavier music, check it out, thelastexit.org. All right, for a recommendation, I'm going to go with Behind the Bastards podcast. Initially, I got listening to this because of Mr. Matt Festa. He had told me they did a 6-part on Vince McMahon. And it's basically it's some of the guys that worked at Cracked, so some of the people who worked at Cracked, and they dig into the history of really bad people, like Vince McMahon. So they've covered big names, and they've covered kind of unknowns, and it's usually pretty entertaining. I'm finding myself listening to more and more of them. So that's going to be my recommendation for this week, Behind the Bastards. It's an entertaining view of just really horrible people in history. So there you go. Check that out. And back to my conversation with Steve. You were listening to Where Did the Road Go on WVBR FM Ithaca. Check us out on the web at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. I'm here with Steve Mera, and you were just mentioning UFOs as appearing like apports. And I can never remember the guy's first name. His last name is Willett. I wrote a book called Illuminations, which talks about the possibility of UFO flaps as mass poltergeist events.
Very intriguing. Yes. I mean, I've looked at the cryptid phenomena. And you talk about, I studied about 30 cases in and around Ohio and those locations in the US where people were reporting dogmen or werewolf type creatures. And I only picked out 30 cases. There was actually a surprise how many there were over the years. But I picked out the best 30 cases and I looked at them. And I started to thinking, these things, in some cases, they'd pursued people, they'd chased them.
Yeah.
I'll give you a scenario. Just one of those cases. They were all very interesting. There was 4 gentlemen who were going to go to a local store to get some alcohol. They tried to take a shortcut through an area which is a remote location where there was a disused train track. There was a quick short route to get there. And they were heading down there. Then they realised that something was from the tree side was following them, and they caught sight of this thing. Well, this thing was, they said it was about 8 foot tall. Its shoulder widths were about 4 to 5 feet in length from one shoulder to the other. It was big, stocky. They described it walking on 2 legs. They thought they were having a Bigfoot type incident, but they clearly noticed that they had the head of a very large dog, like a wolf. Well, they got absolutely petrified. They started to run through it. This thing pursued them. It made a great, incident out of this, because it was snarling and growling and, looking very vicious as it was chasing them. They were just running for the hell of it, to get out of there. But as you do, running down disused train tracks are not easy, and one of their friends falls over. Well, what do the other friends do? They think, oh, no, forget that, leave him. It's every man for himself, But, as they're running away, they're also looking behind, because they're thinking about the poor friend who by this time this creature's got up to. He's on the floor, so petrified. He's actually, the old instinctual behavior takes over. He's curled up like in a fetus position, like a little ball, and he's frozen in fear. That is an old mechanism, really, from years back. That survival sense, because it's like the scene from, Jurassic Park. Like the T-Rex. If you don't move, it might not see me.
Right,
and this is like, and it's just something takes over. And what's this thing? Well, you know what? This, if whatever this be, is predator. It's a predator. It's built as a predator. It's designed as a predator. It's supposed to act like a predator. So this guy's just lying there in shock, on the floor, trembling, in fear. This thing's snarling and growling above him, and it's huge. You could rip him apart in a second. What's it do? Well, it stops, and it looks confused. It's like it's looking around, and it's like, well, the game's up. I don't know what to do now. So what's it do? It runs off. There is not a single predator on the planet that acts like that. Not a single predator, especially when it's a meal ticket on the floor there waiting. Right. He runs off. So really, the whole point of this was to generate fear and vexation. It's like it's a fear-feeding parasite in many cases. And we started to look at, well, that's really interesting. He was left alone eventually. This thing just ran off. The game's up.
Yeah.
But when we looked at other cases where these things had pursued them, there was 2 teenagers, and they were being pursued by one. They got into the family home, which was like a wood cabin. They were staying with the father. Father's asleep upstairs because he works nights. They locked the door, and this thing, it comes up to the door, it's snarling and growling, and it's grabbed the handle of the door, and it's shaking it tremendously as it's growling. And that's like something we do to tease a child, isn't it? Shake the handle. It's to generate fear. This thing could have come straight through the door if he wanted to. He could have come straight through the window. No, they're absolutely petrified, these 2 instead. There's so much noise. Father comes down from upstairs. What the hell is going on? What's all this noise? And they're screaming and shouting at the father, Dad, don't go near the door. There's this thing out there. And he's this kind of no-nonsense guy. I'm not having any of this. And he goes over to the door, unlocks it, and opens the door. And he comes face to face with this thing. This thing just stops in its tracks and it's just looking down at this guy. He's tall, this thing. This guy's just stood there, no nonsense guy, absolutely mesmerized at what he's seeing. What happens? This thing just runs off. So it's like it's like the process is fear. So if it ticks all the boxes? Because I don't go off what we perceive, because that's the first problem. Yeah. Never go off what you perceive.
Right.
But the actions always speak louder than words. And the actions tells me it's like a physical poltergeist incident. And it acts in the same way about the vexation cycle, it's all about the fear gathering and stuff. And that's what gets me really intrigued. When you start looking at these various other phenomena and you think, Well, if you look deep enough within these characteristics, it's got the same characteristics as paranormal phenomena in poltergeist infestations.
Yes.
And many other things as well. So, yeah, it starts to get really intriguing, the paranormal mechanics, across a very broad spectrum of phenomena.
Well,
UFOs on the paranormal.
I had suggested years ago the concept of a wilderness poltergeist, because when people go out Bigfoot hunting, they're not experiencing... I mean, they're experiencing things that could be an ape in the woods, but they're getting rocks thrown at them. The rocks are usually warm, like apports. They're getting mimicry. They're getting, vocalizations. They're getting a lot of stuff that if it was in a house, you would say it was a ghost.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I think if they didn't have any paranormal aspects to the Bigfoot, we would have had one by now.
Yes.
There's some very, very skilled hunters out there, And if there is a Bigfoot population, there has to be a population. You can't just have one or two walking around. They'd never survive over the years. And these date back a long time.
Well, yeah.
There's got to be a reasonably large population of these things. And there's certainly a huge amount of food to sustain them. Because any hunter will say, you follow an animal, you follow the food source. And it starts getting very problematic when the hunters are saying, well, we know it's there. Well, it was invisible. We couldn't see it. We could hear it. We was stood right there. We could hear it was not visible. They followed footprints, in snow ground, and it just ended.
Yes.
And there's no trees nearby. They just wanted to get just plucked off the surface of the planet.
And there's also cases where there's only a right footprint or only a left footprint.
Yeah, it does that. It's like it's done in a certain way that just is provoking and teasing, just like any other paranormal phenomena. We've got to open our limitations, really, and think, get rid of these boxes, compartmentalization. They shouldn't have existed. They really have caused problems for us regarding, investigation process. Get rid of them and just put it all on the table.
Yes.
And just call it for what it is. Because when you do, you start to think, oh, hang on a second, I never realized that, because the answer's in that other camp. Oh, and that's why the paranormal guys will never deal with UFO guys. And this is why they're not realizing what's going on here. Mm-hmm. So once we start to do that, you really get a better picture as to the possibility that we're dealing with a source phenomena that is capable of manipulating our perceptions and doing exactly what it wants, and appearing to us in multiple different facets.
Now, there are parapsychologists that will say all poltergeists are generated by us unconsciously. What degree do you think that's true?
It's not.
Really?
It's as simple as that. Yeah, I mean, you know what? I've dealt with the big parapsychology departments all over the world, and, they try to convince me it's written in stone, it's down to an adolescent, usually a female, usually between the ages of 9 and 15, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. And they try to convince us of that. But what they weren't putting out is the opposing information. I've been on investigations where poltergeist phenomenon infestations are taking place, and it's high frequency, high severity cases. And we've removed the focus or the catalyst or suspected one from the environment. The phenomena still stayed. There's times when the phenomena is been prominent in locations where there are no adolescents. An elderly couple, an example. You're just not hearing about them. So I challenged them in regarding our research, and basically they just snuck off to the corner. They wanted to portray that everything has science evaluation and feasible conclusion that awards science. And sometimes, and it's a shame, because they spend more time, looking to gain ahead in scientific research when they are eliminating, the possibility of what the true phenomena could consist of. They're trying to forcefully find rational explanations. Well, don't get me wrong. Yes, those incidents do take place around catalysts, but catalysts can be of all ages. Mm-hmm. I know a 50-odd-year-old bloke, and he's in the US, and I never met anybody like him in the world. He is incredible catalyst, and he still is.
And what happens with him?
And he's no different. Say that again, sorry.
What happens with him that makes him so outstanding?
Well, it doesn't matter what location he goes in. If there's anything in regarding the paranormal phenomena that's apparently taking place there, he brings it to the surface, and interactions take place very quickly around him. We've recorded lightning literally in the house above him, as he's looking up. It's going across the ceiling, and it's like indoor lightning storms. It's incredible. Light phenomena, interactions with these things, revealing information that he should not have known about certain people. In fact, the police have been involved a few times where there's a body and he's been told and stuff like. He's just incredible, and he's in his 50s now, and like I say, it's not just children.
No,
but they wanted to paint a picture, and that picture is not written in stone. I assure you that we have many cases where there are poltergeist disturbances without the triggers that you would expect from what they are saying. So I challenged them, and they kind of took a few steps back now and said, "Well, yes, there are some cases like that." Well, you only got to have one case like that for your theory to be wrong.
Right.
So.
Well, I feel like there's not one explanation for this stuff. Like, so when I look at a poltergeist, I think, well, it could be coming from spontaneous PK from the person. Yes. Spontaneous PK could be feeding something in the environment, or it could be a complete other that has nothing to do with anything coming from the person. And
well, yes, you're absolutely right. It could be all livable. Let's. How do we even draw the line?
Yeah.
So between intelligent hauntings and poltergeist disturbances, because there are those intelligent hauntings where there's been object manipulation, movements of objects. So it's like, why? Who's drawn that line there between the intelligence hauntings and the poltergeist infestation? Because there shouldn't be a line. That's the problem. We kind of can't help ourselves forcefully push these into certain areas, these certain locations, and separate the phenomena. That's the big problem for us, because we're not getting the whole data.
Right. And again, Tim Renner started out as a flesh and blood Bigfoot guy. And apparently I'm the one that kind of got him off of that. And he started, when he talked to people, asking, like, anything else weird happened to you? And they'd be like, what do you mean? And eventually it would come out that they had haunting phenomena, or they saw strange lights or whatever, but they weren't associating it with the Bigfoot encounter.
Yes, exactly. It's a cocktail. The more research you do, you realize, that it's seemingly it's all the above. The metaphysicality is one of the paranormal mechanics that we work on as well, and that's the most common, most regular thing we work on. And it's fascinating, because there has been experiments in the paranormal in numerous places in the US, in Spain, the UK, Brazil. And they've reached the same levels of dealing or working with paranormal phenomena when it's being demonstrative in regarding metaphysicality. Some of those experiences involved a glass jar moving across a table several times during experiments, and they were communicated to place the jar back on the other side of the table. I think on the fourth attempt, they were told to put it back, and they couldn't, because the hand went right through the object. Investigation and analysis took place where showing that lasers bounced off it, so it was reflective, it cast a shadow. When placing your hand through the device or through the glass, there was a very slight shimmer across your fingers, but you felt no numbness, no coldness, nothing. In fact, the only aspects of it being in our reality was visual. And then after a short period of time, it was solid again, and could move it back.
I was wondering.
The phenomena targeted it and transferred it into metaphysicality over, that it was visually there, but wasn't physically there. Now, if the phenomena can do that, then we've got to consider the Bigfoot phenomena, that sometimes it's physical, it's going to leave prints, it's going to leave fur, it's going to leave scat, it's going to leave things evidentially that it was there in a physical sense. And that's the red herring, because we are forced to think that therefore it must be real in our reality. Not necessarily. If it's metaphysical phenomena, it can switch between the two. And look at the UFO phenomena. How many times are you getting UFOs that it shot right past the aircraft, but there was no air pressure wave? Well, it's like it wasn't really there. We saw it, of course. There's radar equipment. Do we pick it up on radar? The pilots are watching it now. No, it's not there. But the pilots are seeing it. Well, it's not on radar. It's not. Right. There's nothing there physically to bounce it back. Well, they do get them on radar when they want to be. When they are physical in nature. Yes. They're going into water. They're not changed their inertia because they're hitting solid water. No, they don't even leave awake sometimes. Because it's like we are seeing them in our reality. Well, they're not always physical in our reality until they want to be. And when they do, they can come down, land, and make marks on the grounds and interact. The beings themselves, because the UFO, it's not a craft to carry the phenomena. It is the phenomena.
Yes.
And I'm trying to explain this to people. And that the occupants is part and parcel of that phenomena. And they are also metaphysical. They come in, they take people. Well, how did you get? Well, I went through the wall.
Yeah.
Well, they took you through the wall. The metaphysical, when they choose to be, because they can hold on to you.
Right.
Right. And they can move things around. So everything points to all these aspects, the crypto, the paranormal and the ufological. You've got to get rid of what is perceived and look at the actions. The action speaks louder than words. And the actions across them all, because we've done all the stats, it's all seemingly one phenomena that's multiplyingly doing many, many different things of interaction in many different ways, and can be perceived as the most outrageous things, such as animated toys, to animals, to strange creatures, to a demon, to an angel, to a cherub. Could be anything. But the actions are always the same, and that's how we track the phenomena. We don't track the mask. We track the phenomena itself, and you can see how far it goes back in time.
Well, I mean, as far as I can tell, it goes back as far as written history goes, and it goes across cultures. It's just named different things.
Global.
Yeah. I mean,
it's global. Yeah. I mean, it's probably before documented history.
Oh, I'm sure. I think if nothing else, it's a human phenomena. I mean, it's something that interacts with us.
Well, yes, I think if we look at modern human, I always challenge Darwinism, but we always get, as time's gone on, we've de-evolved. I have to say that. We just got worse and worse. Our ancient ancestors, were far so more acute to sounds and frequencies that we can't hear. Yeah. Maybe the visual sight was even better. Certainly the cognition was, and the spiritualism, the consciousness was probably a lot. We've got worse. Or we've been specifically designed, the modern human, to be the only living creature on this planet with having so much limitations, because insects and pets are better than us. Yep. And we've been redesigned so that the phenomena can operate around us and interact with us, and us can completely be not aware of it, because everything else is almost aware of it, but the modern human isn't.
I always find it interesting, the experiences I've had where someone else with me has seen something, but the other person with me has not.
Yeah, it does. You can be singled out. Consciousness is an incredible thing. When that consciousness happens, what we've realized now during certain experiments, when we're dealing firsthand with the phenomena, we have special flow bands. We put them on the head, and it measures your brainwave activity to your mobile device, your cell phone.
Oh.
And it's really, because you could never do that. It was a massive big piece of equipment in the lab that you couldn't make it mobile. So it was impossible. But now we can. And whilst we're out and interacting with phenomena, guess what we found? We found, and how fast it happened, interaction, you could call it Bluetooth pairing if you want, but it's that conscious connection with the phenomena. It happened as quick as 20 seconds. And what happened is the brainwaves changed, and it put us in a state of theta instead of the normal waking process. Now, once we were in theta, that's a very manipulative state. It's like you can, what you see might not necessarily be correct. It's like, it's that process of, when we're almost sleeping and stuff like that, and daydreaming, hypnotic regressions and stuff like that. It's that theta. It puts us into a theta straight away. So we're already, okay, I'm interested in you. Bang, there's a conscious connection. Take control over the individual. Now I've got you. Okay, cognitive limitation can take place. So you're not going to act accordingly if we don't want you to. Secondly, we can also produce you into a theta way so that anything you see can be easily manipulated. In other words, we can do what we want, and you were very confused as to what you're seeing or what you're understanding. We know that now because we've got equipment that tells us. We never had that because we've got to have equipment. The best equipment is, apart from ourselves, of course, and our reaction and listening to our bodies, which many people don't do, is the pieces of equipment, specialized equipment that explores the areas beyond our human perceptions, things that we can't see, things that we can't hear. We don't know what was going on with our brains during these experiences. And now we can figure out, okay, now something we've got evidence here that the phenomena, when that conscious connection or interaction takes place, or even observer effects, that this phenomena somehow reaches out and changes our abilities of perception.
I'm not even sure where to go from there.
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of things that happen that we don't know. The manifestation process, When you say when we leave an EMF print, now for paranormal guys, you'll know this. Or something's just been moved, or there's been this disturbance. Well, where was it? Oh, this is it. This is the object. Right. Okay. So look at the object and you do an EMF print around it. There's a high EMF spike, just where the object was, just like the airport was. Well, they're thinking it's electromagnetic. But what's causing electromagnetic spiking is a gravitational disturbance. There's a gravity well there, microgravity. It's a micro location. It's like, though I hate to use the word portals and stargates and things, but
right.
in a sense of fashion, two things in same space and time can't exist. If something is to materialize within our reality, that place where it occupies is not free of nothing. There's gravity in there, there's light waves, there's all sorts. That has to disappear for something to be replaced. Now, when that disappears, goes somewhere else, it leaves us a hole. That hole takes a little bit of time to fill. Now, in smaller micro ones, in buildings, that can take an hour, 30 minutes. It's very, very small ones. Could be an hour, 3 hours. They'll do material. They'll slowly disappear just as your EMF levels will start to drop. It's the same thing with UFO phenomenon, because what we got our hands on, which was very hard to get, was a DT meter, and these are time displacement meters. What happens is that when UFOs demanifest, when they've been seen in a given area, you can get there fast enough. You can, on occasion, use the DT meter, which has got specialized probes on a very long lead, so you're measuring outside the affected area as against the affected area.
Right.
And it shows a displacement, a latency. Now, it shouldn't happen unless these miniature black holes exist. But it's not always there. It can last up to maybe 48 hours and it just diminishes. So it's like an effect in our environment through the manifestation process. So there are special pieces of equipment we can use which measures not just latency but slight gravitational disturbances. I had a big argument with these professors in psychology. I said, I can prove it. He said, how? I said, we can show you how the gravity well and how it affects light. What do you mean it affects light? I said, well, we have lasers. He said, but you can't get gravity to bend a laser. It would be the gravity of the sun. It's impossible. No, it isn't. I said, so I showed him the demonstration. So I got a laser and I fired it through a ferrocell. Now, a ferrocell is like the old bicycle light lenses. It's slightly concave.
Yeah.
When you fire the laser into the middle of it, it scatters the light because it's concave to the edges. So you end up with a ring of light. And then you just get a normal household magnet and go near it. You'll start to pull the light away from the edge of the ferrocell.
Wow.
When we can go into the gravitational wells, we can see the visual effect on the pulling on the bending of the laser. And I was like, we didn't realize that. They were so adamant that I was wrong. It's got to be the power of the sun and this. No, it hasn't. And this is the problem, because I've talked to scientists and they say regularly to me, just because someone is a physics expert or this, that, and the other, what we are doing is looking into an area that we don't understand or don't have much knowledge about. So they try to apply their physics to the unknown, and it doesn't work like that because we're dealing with unknown physics. That's the problem. That's what makes them so adamant. But, it's fun to see them when they realise, the penny's dropped now. It can happen, can't it? They don't know how, of course, but it can. And that's what we're discovering with specialised pieces of equipment. There's a lot more going on. It's like purposeful. It's designed to be out of our realms of perception, our hearing, sight, touch, everything. And we have to rely on equipment to be able to tell us some of the things that we can't experience.
How does the time displacement thing work? Like, how does that piece of equipment tell?
Yeah. Well, it has two probes on. There's one at the meter end and there's one at the probe end. So you have to put the probe in, and you can get lengths and lengths of these. So the probe can be, 30 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters, if it wants to be. And we can extend it to the location. So we put it in the location where adverse phenomena has been allegedly manifesting, be it paranormal or ufological. And then we can go away to the meter end. And what it does is it does a comparison between the two. It's measuring between the two. And there should be no difference at all. It should be exactly the same. And most times there will be. Occasionally, you've got a difference. Now, it might only be 18 milliseconds. It's nothing. But it should exist. 18 milliseconds shouldn't exist.
I see what you're saying. Okay. So the clock is actually changing on that meter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's already programmed to run as we normally would do. However, there's a difference between the two, and it shouldn't be over.
Right.
I don't know, a distance of say 300 meters or something. It's just unheard of. But it doesn't last for long. Then it slowly dissipates, gets less and less, and then it stops.
Wow. We'll have to continue this on a Patreon segment, but where can people find you online? Like, and where like, can they find the stuff, your books and everything
absolutely.
like that?
Well, a lot of the work that we're doing in this area is called Project Doorway. We are putting information up in video form. The problem with putting out some of this information, sometimes it gets quite censored. I'm always finding things disappearing, and it's a shame, but we just keep pushing it out all the time. We have Steve Mera official YouTube channel where we put out Project Doorway and interviews with other science guys and what they've found and stuff. So we have that. I'm also the CEO of Phenomena Magazine, which is phenomenamagazine.co.uk. It's a magazine that's out every month. We're just going through some website changes, but we're back at the end of this month with a new issue. The whole archive is available to download as well. Free of charge. It's a monthly magazine which goes out all over the world. It's 12 languages and many countries. So, and basically, most people just usually type my name, Steve Mera, Mera, in Google, and I'm usually there. I've done so many different things. I'll pop up somewhere, but I'm easy to get hold of. You can always contact me.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve. This has been utterly fascinating.
No, thank you. I'm glad to share information. It's all about. I don't hold it to the chest. We've got to get this information out, and we've got to help people advance the subject.
Absolutely. All right, I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons for their support. Without you, this show would not be possible. And I want to give a shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Martha, Midnight Review Presents, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Andrew Malone, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Illuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, CJ, Corey Nelson, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, John Hewling, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda, Linz Jackson K, MJ Armstrong, Mark Brady, Mr. Weird, Ole Andre Olar, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Roland Belstadt, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sarah Horgan, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Stevie Norman, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic Podcast, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, The Esoteric Book Club Podcast, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Varosh K, Victoria, Vincent Treewell, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Colin Karras, and Craig Sagastumi. Thank you all so very much for the support. Okay, I'm going to be honest, that conversation absolutely blew me away. As I said, I have had Steve on before, but it's been a while, and I never had a free-form conversation with him like that, and some of the stuff he said was just mind-blowing, and it continues in a Patreon segment. Man, does it continue in a Patreon segment. So, yeah, Steve will hopefully be back sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't get to ask him in the, 3 hours we talked. If you want to become a patron and get the extra content and the shows a week early, just go to wheredidtheroadgo.com, click on the big Patreon link, and it's only $3 a month. There's also discounts for yearly subscriptions and things like that. I want to welcome some new Patreons, Justin R. Chamberlain, Sentient Goo Sleepover. I love that one. Margaret, James Burke, and Ryan Comer. I hope I said everyone's name right. It's hard to know sometimes exactly how people like their names pronounced. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.